All right, so thank you for tuning into Chompin at the Bit. This is episode 55. I'm Kyle Edwards. And on this episode, I'm going to take a look at Week 12 in the NFL. Give you a quick little review of it. Look at some news and notes coming out of the week, as well as top stories that I feel like kind of best explain what happened in Week 12. Of course, by the end of the episode, I will give you my picks from last week, see how well I did. You know, coming down to the last few weeks in the season, and definitely want to up my record as, let me see, coming into the week, I was 30 and 35, you know, still shooting for my high mark, but we'll get into that at the end of the episode. And then, of course, before I close it out, give you a look at some episodes to come. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the NFL action from this past week. And with Steelers-Ravens, when they played Wednesday afternoon, Week 12 became the longest week in NFL history, I believe. Because at least for me, I cannot remember ever being a Wednesday football game. So if you look at the 2020 season, the NFL has now played on every day of the week except for Friday. I don't know if we would ever get that, but hey, maybe it's something for the NFL to shoot for. And then with Steelers and Ravens playing on Wednesday afternoon, it has shifted Week 13 schedule already because Baltimore was supposed to play Thursday Night Football, and I'm sure all of you noticed there was no Thursday Night Football game this week. Well, it's because the Ravens literally played like 18 hours before that. So their matchup, which was going to be Thursday night against the Cowboys, will now be Tuesday. So we have another Tuesday game going. And Pittsburgh was supposed to play Sunday, but they pushed that to Monday at 5 o'clock. So now we have 2 Monday games for Week 13 and a Tuesday game. And we'll kind of get into that scheduling a little later. But yeah, so the league, just from the way that they've acted this week, has let it be known. And even as I said when the season first started, the key word for this year, fluidity. Teams, players, all that have to be fluid. Each week, gonna look a little different. And you know, because I know we touched on this a couple of weeks ago, the league and the Players Association, you know, they got together and they talked about provisions in case games were getting canceled left and right. And you know that the NFL season, each team plays 16 games, but their season is actually 17 weeks long because each team gets a bye week. But the NFL agreed in this special situation that they would go to a Week 18 if necessary. But in going into a Week 18, that would have to add another playoff team to the mix. So just off of this week, it seems like the NFL wants to make sure that they don't go into a Week 18 unless it's like complete, like code red around the league. And so like I said, you see that with the situation in Denver where their whole quarterback room was put on the COVID-19 list. They had to go down to their practice squad just to get a quarterback, and it was a wide receiver. Baltimore had Lamar Jackson on the COVID list. They made sure they made that the game went through. The Steelers, lost their, the Ravens as well, because they were supposed to play Thanksgiving night. They both lost that, national TV game, and got stuck on a Wednesday afternoon. So the league is going to do everything in its power to make sure that 17 weeks is all that is needed. And, the teams I just mentioned, Steelers, Ravens, and Broncos, they all had issues with the scheduling of the NFL and making them play their game. So looking at that, I was just like, who had the biggest beef in terms of the three teams and feeling like they were, I don't know what's the term, not disrespected, but probably forced into a situation that they didn't want. For me, I don't think any of them really have a beef. Like I said, fluidity. Denver, yeah, they're sure they didn't have a quarterback. I get it, but that was their own doing. That was because the quarterbacks weren't following protocol and not wearing masks. That's why they all ended up on the list. And yeah, I get it. You had to go to your practice squad, but you did take a guy who was a quarterback in college that you transitioned to a wide receiver, and you had him play quarterback. So, yeah, I get it. It stinks, but the Broncos kind of did it to themselves. So, they don't really have much of a complaint there. Baltimore, yeah, I get it. Your star quarterback couldn't play, but, I mean, you have a whole roster. You brought in RG3, who was a former starting quarterback in this league, so it shouldn't have been that big of an issue. RG3's been there all year, so it's not like you were put in a situation like Denver, where Denver went into that game pretty much knowing they weren't going to win, and still had to go out there and pretend to have a shot at it. Baltimore, like I said, you had a quarterback in the backfield. There was no problem there. Steelers kind of complained because they wanted the Thursday game, of course, national TV, Thanksgiving Day, big deal. But then it got moved to, it went from a Thursday to Tuesday, and then Baltimore was continuing to have outbreaks and positive tests, so they moved it to Wednesday. Apparently the Steelers weren't too fond, kind of like the Ravens, of playing Wednesday afternoon. Once again, tough. Okay, you knew you had an opponent. It's not like college football, which I talked about in the last episode, where like Coastal Carolina has Liberty on the schedule. Liberty can't play, and then they had to swap in BYU to play the game, so now they're facing a completely different opponent in a couple of days. Steelers and Ravens were set as the matchup for days. You just had extra time in playing them. I guess the time, Wednesday afternoon, maybe you weren't, I guess it's not a normal time to play a game, but I don't really see what the big problem is. And then your next game got pushed out a couple of days, so it's not like you're having a quick turnaround there either. So for me, none of them really have a beef. It's the NFL in 2020. You make do with what you have. Make the best of it. So yeah, the NFL, they went through, played all their games. As I said, that's clearly what their outlook is for the rest of the year. No matter what day we get them on the schedule, they're going to get played. So on to some like actual, matchups and some questions I do have coming out of the week's games. The Eagles. It was probably a couple of weeks ago where I came on here and said that the Eagles are probably the best team in the NFC East because they had Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was probably the best starting quarterback in that division. Remember, this was after Prescott had gotten hurt and Washington was relying on Alex Smith, who hadn't played in a couple of years. And the Giants still have their young guy, Daniel Jones. So it seemed like, they all struggled out of the gate, but you kind of figured the Eagles would turn it around with Carson Wentz. That hasn't happened. Carson Wentz has not shown anything this year that leads me to believe that he should be the starting quarterback in Philly. I don't know what it is. Is he hiding some injury? I doubt it. The talent around him, probably. The offensive line isn't great. The running backs aren't great. The wide receiver options, okay. But game in, game out, it doesn't seem like Wentz puts them in the best position to win games. So coming in to week 12, there was a report that Jalen Hurts was taking more snaps in practice, more first team snaps. So I was under the impression that he was going to play more, and maybe they were going to go into a kind of like what the Saints do with Drew Brees, where, Taysom Hill plays a lot. Only difference is Taysom Hill can play different positions on the field. Jalen Hurts is basically going to be your quarterback. I can't really see you putting him anywhere else. So if you're going to put Hurts out there, then Wentz can't be out there. Like I said, the Saints, you can have Hill and Brees on the field at the same time. But either way, Wentz hasn't done anything to justify that he needs to start every game. You drafted Jalen Hurts pretty high. It was the second or third round. So clearly there's a desire there to see him as a quarterback at some point. I mean, there's been other, third round quarterbacks that have been stars in the league. Just off the top of my head, Russell Wilson was a third round pick. So, and also with the past couple of weeks, especially with Wentz as the starting quarterback, since they are still in the race, I kind of think it's going to be the perfect time to put Jalen Hurts in there, kind of change up things. Maybe Hurts gets something out of the guys that Wentz can't. Not to say that Wentz is a failure as a starting quarterback, but I don't know. It's just something about whether it's he and Peterson, the coach, not working well together, or he and Philadelphia not being a good match. Something there just seems like maybe there needs to be some type of breakup within the organization. Whether if you're going to keep Wentz, maybe you need a new coach's voice and offensive philosophy, or you move on from Wentz, see what you have in Hurts, let Peterson, I guess, try his offense on Hurts, see if it works better. I just can't see it where next year the two of them will be there. Game one, Wentz under center from the start. Yeah, I don't see it. Now, if you're going to tell me they're going to completely overhaul the team and then give Wentz a shot with that, fine. I guess that's the only way I could see it, but it just hasn't seemed to work with Wentz since he hurt his knee when he was having that MVP season. Foles took him to the Super Bowl and they won it. Wentz hasn't really been that great since then. And, looking at last week's game, so Hurts, with all the practice and all that, he threw one pass in the game. That was it. He didn't have any carries, anything like that. One pass. And Wentz went 25 for 45. Not great. 215 yards. Not good. He did have 5 carries for 42 yards. But why? What are they afraid of in putting Jalen Hurts out there? Are they afraid that they completely lose Wentz? Well, fine. But like I said, in that division, it is still very winnable. I mean, I know it's as sad as that is, but what are they, 3-8-1 or something? 3-7-1. Sorry, I gave them an extra loss, but they're 3-7-1. They are half a game out of the division lead. And I do think this is the time to do it. See if you catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe you sneak out the division crown. Because they're not getting in as a wild card. So you got to try something. Next story. Kendall Hinton, who spoke about a little earlier. So he was the practice squad wide receiver that the Broncos made the starting quarterback against the Saints, as, like I said, they didn't have any quarterbacks on the roster. And as you'll see with 2020, a lot of teams have emergency quarterbacks within the organization. And I mean, Kendall Hinton became the buildings burning down, break the glass emergency quarterback. Well, the experiment was a disaster. The former quarterback, now wide receiver, went 1 for 9 for 13 yards. He was sacked only once, lost a yard. The Broncos only had 112 yards total, with 100 yards coming in the rushing game, where they ran for 3 yards a carry. So, basically the offense was worthless. Now, I don't know if that's I get it. You're not going to run the same playbook with the guy, but what was the point? If you're just going to sit there and be one-dimensional, well, you got what you got, 112 yards. And an absolute blowout as the Saints beat them. It was a 30-3. So they did get a field goal out of it. They weren't completely shut out. So, that's silver lining in a large, dark cloud there in Denver. And, I mean, it was a game that Denver technically needed to stay in the playoff hunt, as they're now 4-7. But, I mean, even with Drew Lock under center, Drew Lock would have been the starter if he was eligible to play. But even if they had him behind center, going up against the Saints was going to be a tough game anyway. So, they ultimately probably had the same result, just that it looked totally inept in getting there. And of course, it does look like the Hinton show is going to be a one-time deal, as Locke or Rippin, one of the 4 quarterbacks who was on the COVID list, they should get probably at least 2 or 3 of them back. So, yeah, it was worth a shot for him. I'm sure in his mind he should have done better, but ultimately he was terrible. And you could kind of see it as well, because coming into the game, the Broncos, kind of like the Steelers and Ravens, were doing a lot of complaining. And so from that, I kind of figured that Denver wasn't going to really show up. And it was probably going to get their doors blown off. And ultimately, that's what happened. So, hey, you guys wanted to sit there and cry about it. You should have worried about the game and, had a better game plan. So, whatever. You lost, Denver. Move on. Then, now that we're into we're tying a bow on week 12, looking at going into week 13, it's now time to put the Jets on the watch, because the Jets lost yet again. They are now sitting at 0-11. Now you can start asking the question, will they go 0-16? Now, an NFL team has not gone 0-16 since I want to say it's the Detroit Lions. And I think that was in the early, is that mid 2000s? Hold on. Actually, the Lions did it in 08. Oh yeah, I forgot. The Browns did it just a few years ago in 2017. Man, that seems like forever ago. But yeah, so team hasn't gone 0-16 since the 2017 Cleveland Browns, which, I mean, that kind of says something. You would think in the NFL it'd be difficult to go both 16-0 and 0-16. But if the Jets are able to do it, it would be the third team in 12 years. I mean, just think about that. So, like I said, Jets lose another game. They lost to the Dolphins. What was it, 20-3? A game that Ryan Fitzpatrick started as Tua was on the injured list with the thumb injury. You know, he was pulled from the game the week before, so Fitzmagic came in, did his thing. As I said with Fitzpatrick, he's not a guy you want starting all year, but he's a guy you want in little batches throughout the year. He's very effective that way. It's a weird thing with him. I don't know what it's all about, but that's the kind of quarterback he is. He's kind of like Nick Foles. If you want a comparison, Nick Foles is your new age Ryan Fitzpatrick. But yeah, so coming out of that game, Adam Gase continues to have a job. Talking about this for weeks. I don't know how, but I'm guessing at this point he's going to finish the year. Whatever. He better be gone at like the day the season ends for the Jets. There better be some news ticker on SportsCenter or something about a press conference. You don't even need the press conference. Just put on there breaking news. Adam Gase fired. Because if it doesn't happen the day after the season, I honestly won't know what's going on with the Jets. So, yeah. So Gase has his job there. The team still can't get a win. Was last week Frank Gore, who's let it be known this is going to be his last year in his career. He's had a great career. Probably lasted a little longer than most thought. He said he didn't want to end his career 0-16. So, you know, at least with him, he's going to continue to fight, try to get a win. I honestly don't know where that win's going to come from, because looking at the rest of their schedule, you have a home game with the Raiders. Then they go on the road to face the Seahawks and the Rams. They get a home game with the Browns before they finish the year with a trip to New England to face the Patriots. Now, the Patriots game a couple of weeks ago was probably their best shot at a win. They lost last second field goal by Nick Folk. So looking at these last 5 games, where exactly is their best chance at a win? You look at the Raiders game. I mean, after the way the Raiders showed up against the Falcons last week, I guess you could say that one's more up in the air than it was a couple of weeks ago. But I kind of expect that to be a loss, because you expect the Raiders to kind of bounce back after being embarrassed in Atlanta, and will probably want to take it out on the Jets. So there we go. At the Seahawks, I mean, Seattle's still in a battle in their division, so there should be no let up there. That's probably the lost cause. The Rams, just play back what I just said about the Seahawks. Rams are in the same boat. Browns, now that'd be with 2 games left. The Browns at that point, I mean, they probably won't be playing for the division, so they won't really, well, they'll be fighting for playoff position, because with this year's playoffs, you know, only the top seed gets the bye, so teams 2 through 7 are fighting for position for matchups. So the Jets' best bet on that one would be the Browns are kind of locked into a certain seed, and maybe they rest some guys, gives the Jets a shot. So ultimately, it would probably come down to the last week against the Patriots. Only thing the Jets can hope for is either the Patriots are completely out of it and they're starting like Jarrett Stidham or something, or, well, that's probably it. Because based on the Patriots being 5-6, they're not going to really clinch a playoff spot before their last game, most likely. So it's either they're completely out of it and don't need it, or they're going to need the win to get in. And then in that case, the Jets will probably have no shot, because it'll be their last game. And if they're 0-15 at that point, what's to say that the players won't just completely give give it up and kind of go through the motions and just accept the fact that they're going to go 0-16. So Frank Gore may not want to end his career 0-16, but it's starting to look like it's bound to happen. So this week against the Raiders could be their best shot. I mean, you'll probably have to wait for my picks on probably Sunday. Yeah. You'll probably wait for my NFL picks Sunday to see if they are one of my picks or not. So, just go with that. So yeah, that's kind of the bigger stories that came out of the week. There were some other ones as well, I just mentioned the Raiders and the Falcons game, where that was probably the biggest shock of the week. Raiders did not show up, got embarrassed against the Falcons. So, they kind of hurt their playoff positioning. And just another quick story. In terms of playoff races, your NFC picture is definitely more clear than the AFC. Like I said, with 7 playoff teams, you basically know already who the 7 playoff teams will be. Green Bay, Saints, the Bucks, Seahawks, Rams, Cardinals, and then whoever wins the NFC East. That's basically going to be your playoffs. Now, there's some things that could change because, the Cardinals are sitting as the 7th seed right now, and they have a game lead over the 49ers, Vikings, and the Bears. But ultimately, the NFC is kind of figured out. AFC, the top teams in the AFC are kind of figured out, but the last couple of spots are still up in the air. So there's still some excitement coming into the end of the year, which is what the NFL wants every season, of course. You don't want the last couple of games to be meaningless for everybody with playoff seeds already sewn up. So kind of getting into the fun part of the year. As I've said with Bill Belichick says every year, once you get after Thanksgiving, that's when the pressure ratchets up and you start getting into playoff mode. So I know all of you like me will be, patiently waiting each weekend for great action. And then we're going to start getting into Saturday games coming up. So I think Saturday games replace Thursday night games or something like that. I think that's how the schedule works. So yeah, definitely exciting. Hopefully my Patriots can find their way in. I know the math isn't really on their side at this point, but crazier things have happened, and hey, it's 2020. But yeah, so now with that, we're gonna get into the best part of every week when I do my review show, my picks. And with this week, I did do 7 picks as, like I said, Steelers, Ravens got switched to Wednesday, so it became kind of a prime time game in the afternoon, so I added it to my pick list. So we'll go ahead, go over the picks real quick. So last week, I went 1-5, terrible week. 30-35. Like I said, 7 picks this week. Hopefully I can get 7 picks, get to at least 4. Would love to go 5-2, but let's see. So, the week started on Thanksgiving. So the first game was the Texans and the Lions. The Texans were a 2.5 point favorite on the road. I took the Texans in that matchup. The Texans did win it 41-25. So that was a win. We all remember Deshaun Watson had a great day. Wide receivers were open all over the place. Ultimately led to Matt Patricia getting fired. So, yeah. Then there was game 2, Thanksgiving. Redskins and the Cowboys. I So shockingly, the Cowboys were the favorite in that game. I went ahead with the underdog, the Redskins. I did it again, the Redskins. They're the Washington football team. So, the Washington football team. And as the underdog, took them. They ended up winning 41-16. It's another win. That game was kind of close early. Then the Cowboys started having turnover issues. Ezekiel had another fumble. Alex Smith, I got to give it to him. Alex Smith has come into the starting lineup, and he's played very well. So, and I said when he first got back out there, I'm a fan of Alex Smith. I hope he does well. It could be that the Washington football team might actually end up being the best team in that division. They have a young defensive line with Chase Young that get after the quarterback. So, shout out to them. We'll definitely see how that terrible division ends up, but maybe it's Washington's division to win. So 2-0 so far. Now we're getting into Sunday's action. So the game I mentioned before, Raiders-Falcons, was the third pick on my list. I went with the Raiders. I figured, the Falcons have been a disappointment all year. Raiders are coming off that close game where they should have actually beaten the Chiefs, would have gotten the sweep against them, but had a tough loss. So I thought they'd come in to Atlanta and kind of show out, get a good win, feel better about themselves. That did not happen. The Raiders went in as a 3.5-point favorite on the road. I took them. They got blown out 43-6. The defense was terrible. David Carr in the offense was a joke. So that led to 43-6. And mind you, the Falcons didn't even have Julio Jones. So thanks a lot, Raiders. Sorry. Yes, that was a loss. So 2-1 so far. Then the next game was the game that I said I was on the fence about all week. Cardinals, Patriots. The Cardinals were going in as a 2.5-point favorite on the road in New England. I went back and forth on this one because the 2.5 points was tempting either way. I ended up going with the Cardinals because I figured that for some reason the Patriots would play them tough, keep it close, but I thought maybe the Cardinals might win, last second field goal type thing or whatever. Well, what actually ended up happening was the reverse. It was a tight game. Patriots offense wasn't that great, but their defense kept them in the game. They had a couple of key turnovers, and then Nick Folk hit a 50-yard field goal. Time expired. Patriots won 20-17. So, I was happy to see them win, but I didn't pick them. So, that's another loss. Now 2-2 on the week. Then was the Bears and the Packers game. Now, this pick, I got to tell you, I was clearly way out of my mind on this one because the Bears were an 8.5-point underdog going up against Green Bay. I went with the Bears. I can't remember what my reasoning was. It had to be something like, I don't know, I think it might have been the 8.5 might have thrown me. And with the switch, so the switch to Trubisky, I thought might give the Bears offense a little jolt for whatever reason. And maybe they stick closer to Green Bay, ultimately losing, but probably by like a touchdown. Well, they lost 41-25. So that's another loss. Now 2-3. Trubisky actually wasn't that bad, but there was a pivotal play in that game where the Bears actually stopped Green Bay when it was 41-25. And it was like 4th and 2 around midfield. Green Bay went for it. So I was watching that thinking, Chicago stops them, takes over on downs. Maybe Trubisky gives them like a late touchdown. I get like a backdoor cover with a late score. Didn't happen. Got the loss. 2-3. So now we're on to, who's this? Seahawks, Eagles, the Monday night game. Seahawks went into that one as a 5.5 point favorite. I took the Seahawks in that matchup. The Seahawks ended up winning 23-17. That was a game that was a lot closer than I thought it should have been. I think the Seahawks were up like 23-10. The Eagles had a late score to make it 23-17, had a shot at getting the ball back. And I kind of thought with the way the week was going after the first two games on Thursday that maybe it wasn't my week and the Eagles were going to find a way to get back into it and cover. They didn't. The Seahawks did. So that was a win. So normally my week would have ended there. 3-3. Whatever. But like I said, Steelers-Ravens was an extra game as got pushed to Wednesday. So, and luckily when I made my picks, the line on that game was 3.5 for the Steelers. Because I believe ultimately when the game got played Wednesday, the line was like 10.5 or something. But since I made my pick when it was 3.5, that's why I locked it in. Good thing I did, because it was an ugly game. It was kind of cold, so it wasn't that great to play in, but it was Pittsburgh, so they're used to it. Baltimore goes up there every year. They were used to it, but RG3 wasn't that effective as a quarterback. He actually ended up hurting his hamstring on a scramble. We saw a little bit of Trace McSorley, the guy out of Penn State. And side note, RG3 is now on IR with that same hamstring injury, so he might be done for the rest of the regular season, whether they get into the playoffs or not. But Lamar Jackson should be back. He's eligible to come off the list, I think Saturday, so we'll have to see if that happens or not. But yeah, so the Steelers made enough plays, got the win, 19-14. They covered the 3.5, so that was another win for me. So on the week, ended up going 4-3, which, it's a mini win. I'll take that, yeah. And my overall record is now 34-38. I'm still below 500, but I'm slowly getting there. So I'm now at 47.2%. I still say I'm going to get to 60% by the end of the year. Might be running out of games at this point as we are into week 13. But see, I've been kind of wondering whether I should probably switch to more games now. Like, I feel like 7 kind of works going forward. Yeah, I'll probably do 7 for the next couple of weeks. And then, wherever we are, maybe like the last 2 weeks, I might just pick all the games, see how well I do with that. But for now, I think 7 will be the new number going forward for the next few weeks. At least that way I can't finish like 3-3 anymore. I'll either be 4-3 or 3-4 or something like that. But yeah, so like I said, 4-3 in the week. Just to recap, my 4 wins were the Texans over the Lions, Washington football team over the Cowboys, Seahawks over the Eagles, Steelers over the Ravens. 3 losses were the Falcons beating my Raiders pick, Patriots beating my Cardinals pick, and the Packers beating my Bears pick. So there we are. With that kind of wraps up week 12. But for my NBA fans, next episode, which will be tomorrow, I'm going to get into the NBA talk because a lot has gone on since I last spoke about it. We've had I guess you could say a major trade happen. We'll dive deep into that one to see if it's really a big deal or not. We've had a couple of big signings. Get into that. The Gordon Hayward situation has been fixed. It's finally over, but we'll kind of look at some rumors that have come out of what exactly could have happened versus what actually ended up happening. Plus, the NBA has released the first half of the schedule, so we'll go through that as well. We'll touch on that a little bit. Probably save kind of a deep look into the first half schedule for another episode. Pick out some matchups that I'm excited to see. But hey, NBA fans, we're getting there. We are now a week away from the preseason starting and 18 days from the 2020-2021 season starting. I'm excited. Got a lot of good content coming for the NBA season. It's going to be fun. So I know you'll tune in for that. Well, hopefully you'll stick around for that. And as we wind down the NFL season, still got a lot of NFL to talk about, college football and all that. But yeah, so thanks for tuning in. As I always say, if you're new here, hope you liked what you heard. Wherever you're listening to the podcast, as it's on all major platforms, definitely give the show, subscribe or follow. And depending on what platform you're on, if you can leave a review, definitely do that. Helps out a lot. That for all of you, follow the show on its Facebook page, Chompin at the Bit, or on Twitter at Chompin Podcast. And there can interact. As I've been saying, trying to make this kind of an interactive thing with you guys. So on Twitter, I will put up polls based off of stuff that I might talk about. And on the Facebook page, you can also get access to all the episodes there as well, and on Twitter. So kind of everywhere you go, I'm there. So thanks again. Be safe out there. God bless. And I will catch you the next episode. All right.